Well, my father came from Lunate Pozzolo, Italy, province of Milano. And he came over in 1903. But prior to that, he had an uncle that was, I don't know how many years before that he'd been here. And I think he's the one that brought him over. And he worked, when he first arrived here, worked at the brickyard, like a lot of them did. And then he, after about, I guess about 1913, he went back to Italy, met my mother, and they got married. And they came back, and she came back with him. In the meantime, he went out on his own, doing landscaping and garden work here, you know, in San Rafael and San Anselmo and Ross. And that, you know, after that, he bought a home in San Rafael, and it was a pretty good piece of property. And actually, he's a typical Italian, raised chickens. In fact, we had a goat and a few rabbits, and they used to make wine. Yeah, when he was a young boy, naturally, he went to whatever, in a small towns, it's usually the 5th grade, and by this time, you're 12 years old. And so he went to work as a baker's helper, and he was a baker until he came over here to the United States. And from there, he worked out at the brickyard. He was a pretty handy man, so I guess they put him on construction. And eventually, they made him a storekeeper for the company store. And naturally, after he went to Italy, and my mother, he got married, then he moved to San Rafael. That was just before I was born. Because back there at the brickyard, there was no doctors there or anything, you know. And so they moved to San Rafael and went on from there. As I say, around the house, he was always putting around, and he was remodeling it and stuff like that. He lived 40. Yeah. I was 8 years old, and he was 40 years old. Just 40 years old.
So you were born when?
February 16, 1916. I have one sister.
She's younger, older?
She's older, 2 years older.
She lives where?
She lives in Nevada.
Oh, Nevada.
Yeah. Well, my mom, she was a terrific dressmaker. And she got to do a little dressmaking and stuff like that, alterations, and to keep us going. But then it seems that her relatives back in Italy, she was here as a widow, and they figured she was here all by herself, you know, and so they finally talked her into going back to Italy, which we did.
Get back to Italy.
We left from San Francisco down through Panama, and that's across the Adriatic and the Atlantic, and up the Straits of Gibraltar to Genoa. And then from there, it wasn't too far, or about a 2-hour train ride from where we lived. Altogether, about 30 days.
Wow. 30 days.
They were a combination of passenger and freight. And actually going from, actually their port was Vancouver, British Columbia. And from there to Trieste, which was a home port. And they'd stop like down through San Francisco, naturally, Portland. And whatever they had any cargo to pick up, they'd pull into port. And whatever, 1, 2 days, depending on what the cargo was, and load, then they'd proceed to another port. If they had to stop, they'd pull in and do the same thing. Of course, when Mussolini went into power, he naturally had the fascist party. And there was the King's army and Mussolini's army. So they can't have two armies. So the King's army went. See? And then he built up the Navy, the Army, and they had for a small country, they had a terrific Air Force. Because they had fighters and bombers, the whole bit. In the meantime, I was getting ready to go to Ethiopia, to Abyssinia. Oh yes, that was conscription, mandatory. I believe I was 18 years old. Once a month they'd go out for, you might say, maneuvers. I would teach them how to shoot a gun and handle the field pieces. And then when they were 20, I think it was 20 or 21, they'd get drafted. They'd go through like we over here our draft,
Right, yeah.
the physical and the whole bit.
Right.
Then depending on what their aptitude was, then they'd put them in different branches of the service.
Were you asked to join?
No, I was there on a visa. I wasn't born there.
Right.
I'm
yes.
a United States
American
citizen.
Yes.
And so they couldn't press the issue. But the small towns, you know, would be our mayor.
Right.
He knew I was there, and he knew about how old I was, and I had a cousin that worked in the office. So once in a while, he used to tell me, "Hey, the mayor wants to go in and sign up for the military." So I'd return the compliment and tell him I'm not born here; I'm an American citizen. So they couldn't touch me.
Oh, okay. All right.
No, I was there, and I didn't like it there. My sister, we just didn't belong there.
Right.
We were natives over here, so we did the best we could over there.
Right.
And then when things, get the right for us, we managed to come back over again. Yeah, come back home. Yeah, I went to the short primary. Well, I went to kindergarten there too, short primary, and I went to the 5th grade school because I had the 6th, 7th, and 8th on the corner of 4th and the East Street.
Okay.
So I went there. Then from there, a couple of years, then I went to parochial school. Yes, when I was back in Italy, I did go look for a job,
Right.
and I was a apprentice blacksmith.
Oh, okay.
See, I worked as the handy boy in the blacksmith shop.
Oh, all right.
Well, when I was in Italy, and as a blacksmith's helper or an apprentice, all you do is you get a tip at the end of the week. Well, you weren't on wages or salary or anything like that.
Right.
And if somebody came in and they brought their horses, because they used to shoe the horses, they
Right.
brought their horse in, and to shoe the horses, and they'd usually give the boy a few liters tip. Well, in Santa Fe, I started to work for Vic's machine shop,
Okay.
because Vic had not only the machine shop, they used to do wrought iron work.
Okay.
And over in Italy, I used to do that because I was an apprentice, and we used to build, railings and gates and so on and so forth.
Yes.
So I was quite experienced at it. So I went to work for Vic.
Do you remember how much you made?
Yeah, 2.5 a week.
Was that good?
No, even in those days, it was very poor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think, and then I think he gave me $3 for 1 week, then he fired me.
Did he tell you
Why, I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. Your next job would be what? Where would you go?
Then from there, I went to work for the fellow that used to own the Santa Fe lumber mill, Christensen.
Okay.
And he was putting up a building on 4th Street, remember where the 4th Street fire was?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
All right. It would be on, well, in other words, it was Ed's Auto Supply, was that, and that's,
Oh, yes, yes.
all right. We put up the building, that building that Ed was in, actually they put one floor, then we went up and put a second story up. And I worked for him. And then I was getting $3 a day. Now that was good money.
Yes, $2.50 a week to $3.
Yeah, that's good money.
Yeah.
And of course it was 6 days a week. But there was, and then I really wasn't into building, I guess. I didn't particularly care to be a carpenter.
Yeah.
So the opportunity came up to go to work for the Siren company.
Okay.
So I started there. Oh yeah, there's one in particular, it's on 4th Street. It belongs to one of the Soldavinis. I had the market down here on 8th Street.
Okay. So
Actually, that would be on G Street.
okay. So we go see your artwork.
And other than that, there's 2 homes there. They're both identical. It's, going south down C Street. As you cross the creek, there's a little bend in the street there.
Okay.
And it sits on the right-hand side. And there's a little, I don't know, a little cul-de-sac or something there.
Okay, yeah.
It's, I think, the 3rd house from the corner, either the 2nd or 3rd.
For a job?
No, it was a friend of mine. He used to be a mechanic for Jack Hunt, the Hunt Garage. And he was the employment agency. because he worked there for a while, and then I don't know, went to work in San Francisco or someplace, a better job. No, it was, I don't know, the building was, oh, I don't know, it might have been 20 feet wide and about 40 feet long. What it was originally built for, we don't know.
Okay.
Because it had a lot of windows and skylights.
So what-
Adolf Mühlsdorfer was the dad.
The architect.
Yeah, the architect.
And the son graduates from Cal,
As far as I know, yes.
right, 1903-ish, something like that?
He originally he started school, I guess, in out here at the old Hitchcock Academy.
Okay, and put it on my fire engine.
Like these, naturally, there's a casting involved.
Okay.
It comes from the drawing board, and then it goes to a pattern maker. If there's any patterns involved, it goes to the pattern makers. They make up the pattern. Then it goes to the foundry. They make the castings, and when it comes back, then the machine shop, they machine up the parts, and then naturally the parts they're assembled.
That's Studebakers.
Those were, I don't know what year Studebakers they were, but they're pretty old. And they had this one Siren here, that's a Studebaker starting motor. And it was a gear drive, and actually they were all 6-volt.
Okay.
And when we had to have a 12-volt, then we increased the capacity of the field coils.
You guys did this yourself inside?
Yeah. We converted from 6-volt to 12-volt. No, he sold it. That was after I left.
Okay.
He decided to get out of it, so he sold the business.
And it moves to Sausalito?
As far as I know, yes, he moved to Sausalito.
Who the owners were at that time?
Yeah, at that time I believe it was Don Keeler and Gordon Blumenfeld.
Oh, okay. The other chief.
Peter Bechtel got into it because Gordon Blumenfeld, he got out of the business.
Okay.
So Peter Bechtel, he bought in, and his mother had purchased the property where Santa Rosa Brass and Bronze Foundry was.
Okay.
And it was a well-run and well-set-up business, as far as the foundry business goes.
Is this the same foundry that made the Santa Rosa nozzle?
Yes, same one, yeah.
one, okay.
Yeah, that was a little bit of a side
Right.
job,
Okay.
something he wanted to promote.
Right.
And so after they moved up there, in the meantime, I'd had nothing to do with it because I'd quit, and finally they wanted me to go back to work for them. And so one day, Peter Bechtel and Don Keeler came down, and you might say begged me to go back to work for them, which I did.
And they were located where?
I was told that after they closed in Santa Rosa, the Santa Rosa Brass Foundry, Don Keeler and one of his managers went to Placerville. They moved the equipment up there, and that was the final straw because they just couldn't make it. I used to do all the pattern work, and then when the castings come in because a lot of times we made just a temporary pattern, for instance, one of a kind, that was made out of wood. And after you have your casting, you forget about it. But when you make a casting for production, the patterns have to be a production pattern. So you make the master pattern, which is made out of wood, and that you have to allow the proper shrinkage, not only for the original casting for the patterns, but even after you have the master patterns, they have to allow shrinkage on that. But I used to make them out of wood. Then when you get to those castings back, if they required any machining of any kind, we'd do that, and then we'd mount them on a pattern board. And that would be a permanent pattern. So you're going to thousands of castings off of that one pattern. Then after the final casting gets machined, and it needs plating. It gets plated, whatever they want. They want them.
Did you guys do plating up there too?
No. We used to do polishing
Okay.
most of the time. If there's any amount at all, we'd send it out and have it polished. But the chrome plating, no. At one time when they built the Siren, that was nickel. And they had nickeling tanks there, but they weren't being used anymore because times had changed and it was going to chrome. Nobody wanted nickel anymore.
Right. Yeah, is that true? Kinda?
Dave Torini's brother had the junkyard. John Torini.
Okay. So,
Yeah, we used to get the fields, the housing, then we'd wind our own fields, and then we'd buy the armatures, a certain type, then we'd convert them for the Siren.
So you would go get parts from John.
Yeah, the housing for the field blocks and the housing, which is that round body, we get those from the junkyard, and we'd rebuild them because they had to be machined, you know.
Now after.
Well, that goes way back when I came back from Italy, you know, and
Okay.
I was 20 years old,
Yeah.
and some of the Dave Torini's brother John and a few others, you know, they used to talk hunting. So we got together and we started to hunt together.
For the world, for the big game.
Yeah, I've gone. Yeah, well, we not only hunted Marin County, but we go to Modoc County
Yeah.
and other adjoining counties, Nevada, Utah, Idaho, Washington.
I'm trying to get that special permit to go hunt.
Yeah, and Idaho.
You're still hunting?
Yeah, yeah.
You still hunting big game or whatever?
Not like these.
Yeah, right.
It's getting a little bit out of my reach. A little bit too expensive.
How can I tell when this was made? Jamie, come on, you do this, not me.
Uh,
I see a 38 there with a 4. You ask questions.
That's the serial number there.
Okay.
And the 4 is a model, naturally. And in other words, supposedly, I don't know, it all depends, they started from 1 or 100. That would mean that this was the 384th one they built.
Okay.
And the numbers you see on those are quite a bit higher. So they just carried the numbers all
So
over.
okay.
Yeah.
That would be a good indicator of age, huh?
Yeah.
And on the tag too, like this one has the Ross tag, and this one has San Francisco.
At one time, well, Senior, we used to offer Senior, actually he was a builder in San Francisco, he had his office over there.
Uh-huh.
And I guess, being the town of Ross is the town of Ross,
Right, the city of San Francisco.
and they had all the office work was done over there.
Okay. Because I've seen advertising where it says Cam Siren San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I think that was to kind of look more flashy to people around the country buying something from San Francisco.
Probably, yeah, because Ross was just a little,
town,
hamlet, you know. In fact, they lived here, but it was a small town.
Right, yeah.
And after Musdorf Senior died, evidently they closed up the office over there, and so then they went to using the Ross address. That's as far as I know.
So what is the difference between the size of this drive unit that's driving this power versus this looks so much bigger, but could this just be housing?
No,
Or this
it's
is more
the motor is much bigger.
Bigger.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what would be, you might say, our standard starting motor over here, about that size.
All right.
Of course, nowadays they've changed, but in those days, that was a standard motor.
Yeah, yeah. Jamie, go ahead.
Yeah, on one of them that the Alto Fire District had, it had a custom front where instead of saying Cam, it said Alto. Was that common, or was that a favor to somebody, or a custom order,
No,
obviously?
that was, what was the name? Carl Heinen. He was the fire chief. And he was
Alto Richardson Bay.
he was an avid fireman. He lived for a fire
He's a
department.
master mechanic.
Yeah, and in fact,
Fire trucks up from scratch. Never bought a new one.
he probably had that made custom,
Yeah.
but that was not, it wasn't a stock
Yeah, no.
faceplate.
Alto Richardson Bay.
Yeah, and was that something that would be done as a request item, or was that
No,
apparently
that's
one-off?
just one of, yeah.
Yeah.
Knowing Carl as I know,
Well,
But-
you knew Carl, did you?
because even on his personal vehicle. He had, I forget what the logo was, with a cross axe or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. But he was quite a guy. So, okay, that's how it came about.
Yeah.
They still have it? It says Alto on it, you know?
It was held by a private party in up on Marina Vista, and it was the real long-nosed Seagrave,
Okay.
and it had a custom on the front of the nose had the cam siren mounted there, and it had the Alto badge on the siren.
I've seen a couple of these on eBay running for $400 and stuff like that, cam sirens. I don't even look at the other ones.
This was in a box of junk that somebody turned into the fire station in Bolinas and said, "Do you want this?"
In Bolinas?
Yeah, and they had a couple, over the years have encountered, there's a couple bouncing around that
Wow.
people are interested in keeping, and they know what it is, and they're around out there.
Yeah, because on that siren, all the pattern work, I did that. When we changed the model, this base here,
Right.
that was made by me.
Oh, well, okay.
And this part, the cage here, what we call the cage,
Right.
I made the patterns for that.
Oh,
And whatever pattern that was involved in, I did the work.
okay. And so your name appears on the patent in Washington someplace, right?
No, I don't appear any place.
Okay. Okay. So how long would it take to make one of those from scratch? So, I mean, building it up to go into production. Just this little bit of housing with the veins.
To make the patterns and all
Was-
from the
Yeah,
drawings.
The draftsman takes a piece of paper and says, "Okay, here, Louis, make
It, yeah.
production model."
All person could, one man, about a month, because there's a certain amount of tuning that goes with it. You not only make,
You know,
Because I've seen on the balancing of the impeller to make the noise that it was, with a drill press. on it,
Yeah,
it looked like,
yeah,
just to get everything.
you get it balanced,
Balanced
yeah.
out.
Yeah, we had a special mandrel we put the rotor on, or the fans, we call
Did
it.
that show on mine if we took it apart? No, and we've got the screen in front of it. I mean, the balance, those balance.
If we take this, I forget what mine even has on it. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
But we do balance them. You put it on some real sensitive bearings, and you wait for the high spot, the heavy spot,
Okay.
and you get it so you can turn them and it'll stay. Otherwise, they vibrate something fierce.
So was the screen like the original?
This is the
Like the
original.
first,
Yeah,
first series, then to go to this.
yeah. When we went to this type, we never did use the screen anymore.
Okay.
Because if we start cutting with the mill, we cut the ports. But then it got to be, you'd lose a lot of them because then they'd break, and the casting wasn't very sound. They would break. So we found that the wire.
In the heyday of these, how many would you put out a year? Any idea?
Oh.
500, 200?
Oh, it's hard to say. Maybe
Yeah, 'cause
300, 400,
That's
500.
all I see is cam sirens on the old fire.
Yeah.
These guys
Yeah.
are very,
It was well known. They had a good reputation.
almost all American La France, the old ones.
Yeah. We supplied America La France and Van Pelt,
Yeah.
Seagrave.
So we were going from the hand siren, making the transition to electricity to these ones here. So when you look at the history of, like you know, so the
Yeah.
history of it, fascinating.
And on some of these, instead of the aluminum housing, it had had a stamped steel and then chromed. Was that just sort of the evolution of the? It was
It
an
was-
older one.
It didn't have this bell on it.
Yeah, the bell was stamped and then chromed.
No, the ones we've always made, the ones I had ended up doing, they were spun. And,
Okay.
with this shape, that was it.
Okay. But in steel and then.
Yeah, they
Chrome
could have
steel.
been. They could have been steel. Sometimes they wanted them just painted, so you'd have them spun out of steel, which was, the material was cheaper,
Yeah.
and then they'd shoot a coat of primer on them, paint them. But most of the time they were chrome plated,
Yeah.
or the aluminum ones. This is aluminum they're polished.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, aluminum oxidizes if they're out in the weather.
Yeah, I'm sure, like Jamie was saying, my and the old one there has been.
Yeah, this was probably nickel plated right there at Ross
Right.
when they had the plating tank.
Yeah. I gotta go up and find this building, just to see, I mean, I don't know what it looks like, but I know where it's,
I mean, where it used to be?
yeah, I mean, on
No, just go up Laurel Grove to Winding Way,
Winding Way, yeah,
and then it'll be nice to be on the left-hand side going up,
okay,
and you can't miss it, because the property was divided.
right,
When you first go Winding Way, there's a big steel gate there with a big mansion.
okay,
And then you go a little further up, there's another small gate. And that's the entrance to the second home they built up there.
okay,
And when you come to the gate, to your right, there's a little house in there, which is, I think, a guest cottage.
okay,
That's where the shop was,
oh, okay, okay.
right back in that
Right,
corner.
right, simple.
Yeah. It's all
Commute wasn't long,
it's all grown with a big hedge and bamboo, and then it's all fenced off now. But they still have the gate there. Now I know I talked to the lady once they were building that,
oh, did you, okay,
because they built the one home, then they built another one, and I don't know. This couple came from New York. They bought the second house,
Right.
and the property went with it. That included where the shop was in the back, and she didn't like it. She had it torn down, and rebuilt it.
oh, okay, so the original shop's gone,
Yeah, the original shop. Yeah, that's where the guest home is.
a footprint, yeah. Oh,
Is
previous room.
yeah, it's kind of a funny home. It's low. They try to keep it low so that, it wouldn't be too conspicuous.
Jamie, you happy, or you wanna take anything?
You might.
Oh, yeah, that's.
Huh? I'm okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's the same lady or not, but her name was, but it was Cordis,
okay,
and she was from New York,
okay.
and he from a neighboring state. So you might punch the bell and introduce yourself
Yes,
and
yeah.
talk to the lady.
Yeah, see what did you find anything before you tore it down?
She did tell me that when they were doing the excavating, because the creek ran down the side of it, so they put all the concrete culvert in there.
Okay,
And they had somebody in it with the dozer, and I talked to the operator. He said, well, I was wondering what was going on back here because I found all kinds of small motors back there in the creek. See, that's where all the junk used to go, was in the creek. And then I talked to her one day, and she said, "Oh, we found some terrific old bottles, odd bottles." So she said, no doubt she collected them all.
wow,
So if you get to talk to her,
yeah, it's kinda cool, I have to do that,
Probably a lot of stuff
yeah,
Yeah.
buried in the creek.
yeah,
Because out in Woodacre, and you'll love this, when they cleaned everything out, they threw boxes of these out,
yeah,
and that's Woodacre. They stored everything, and then,
yeah. Because Woodacre used to be the county fire department. That's where it all started.
County Fire World Headquarters, and had the truck. That's where they built the trucks out there, and they had these, and they'd install them. But over the years, they'd collect. I have a couple of big red lights, the S&N lamp company, like the really big red lamp.
yeah.
One of those got thrown out, and the cam sirens, and the other small lights made by S&N, they were just a flasher, no beacon, just like a Fresnel lens. Those went in, and a lot of the guys went dumpster diving, but a lot of that good old stuff just went, and nozzles and everything just went off to the
yeah, I
scrapyard.
think of all the
Yeah.
Santa Rosa nozzles that got in the dumps, they're gorgeous nozzles, the Santa Rosa nozzles with the rose and stuff, gee, they're gorgeous nozzles,
Because we built a pretty good range of nozzles ourselves,
yeah,
from the 2.5-inch plate pipe
right, yeah,
with the big handles on it,
yeah.
and small stuff.
And now you got me looking for just
Yeah.
cam stuff. Yeah, I'm looking for cam because I find it raw
Yeah,
California.
and that's what got its name. Our tips we put on they were 1.5 inches, but they were long. I think they were 8 or 9 inches long. They were, in other words, the bore was not just a
Right.
taper.
Right.
It had a cone in it. That's where they got a cam cone. That's where the nozzles got its name.
Okay.
I've always wondered about that.
Yeah.
Yes, okay,
yeah.
so it's in the nozzle.
Yeah, because I had looked on Google for cam cone siren, thinking that maybe that was the
Yeah.
full name, but I never.
I looked for freewheeling sirens. The only thing I got is a few advertising, which I copied. Ads for San Francisco and stuff like that. And then one is who made it. The father gets the credit. the architectural father is the guy who gets the credit for these, but I think it was the son who really did it,
Yeah.
you know, because that's his initials. That's
Yeah,
the
that's
father's
C.A. Muse was Conrad A. Musdorfer was
Right,
Adolf.
and that's the son. The son also, the son is, I think the middle name is Peter. So
Philip.
that's a fine-
Philip.
Yeah, and I think Phillips.
Philip
But his
P.
father got the CAM, so he probably funded the money, whatever.
Well, no doubt he financed the business.
Yeah, and the son had the mechanical ability
Yeah.
to build them. So that's the story of camp. I mean,
In
that's-
fact, I have one of the little nozzles here that we used to build.
Yeah, we saw,
I showed it to you, didn't
Yeah,
I?
we did,
Yeah,
yes,
it's
yeah.
for the Forest Service, just a little shut off with a
Yeah, with the internal.
with the ball.
Yeah.
The ball, yeah, and that was a later model. Before it was a floating plate, but they weren't all that great. They said leak dripple out, you know,
Yeah.
and firemen don't like that.
You want to talk about this? You want to bring it out in the sun?
Yeah, it's all right. You can take it out here.
Shoot
It won't.
a shot.
It won't melt.
Just turn around a
It's going to be better out here.
little. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to take one of these down and
Yeah, if you could get to see that lady, she's still an owner there. Why? It'd be,
we are. All right. What are we looking at here, Louis?
here you're looking at a pattern board.
And this is a patent for?
This is something I'm building for myself.
Oh, okay.
But anyhow, this is really the pattern, and these are to control the shrinkage of the metal. They call them shrink bosses. These are little, a little bit too heavy, I think.
Yeah.
And this is the feeder gate,
Okay.
or what is they call it the sprue. But this is where they cut the hole to they pour the metal. See, because when it's in they mold it. They'll take, this is the bottom side, the cope side, the drag side.
Okay.
The bottom. They take and they put this with the flask fits around it. I don't know if you're familiar
Right.
with them.
Yeah. A little bit.
And they ram the sand in there, and then they flop it over, and they put the other half of the flask on it. They do this side,
Okay.
and then they use a vibrator to kind of shake it loose, so it's, because they have to be drafted. They have to have taper on it, otherwise it won't pull.
Yeah.
They pull the lift cope off of it, then they'll lift the pattern out, the drag, and then when they get ready to cast it, they take and put the two halves together.
Okay.
In other words, so you'll come out. In fact, I can show you this one.
Yeah, you got it out in the garage?
I'll get it.
Yeah, okay.
It's just only partly machined.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if I have that on here or not. No. This is another part that belongs to this,
Right.
and this also. In other words,
That's that one.
that's what that is.
Okay. And this is going to be used how? What are you using this for?
This is one of my own projects.
Right.
I'm making an attachment for my lathe. If I want to turn, for instance, a ball for shut-off nozzles, I can do that.
Really?
See? Put the bar stock in, or the catch, whatever it is, and when I get this set up, I put it in the machine, and it'll turn it and come out with the ball. See? But there's only one catch to it. You either have to have a little boss that sticks out, or a hole in it, so you can grab it in a chuck, see? Then you can't machine the whole thing perfect. Might be able to get all the way around,
Yeah.
except that little boss that sticks out. But then that has to be finished another way.
Yeah.
And if it has a hole through, you put it on the mandrel, and then you come out and it's all done.
A little bit of